guys, what's up? This is Crex and I want to welcome you to episode 7 of Soundwave, where today we will be reviewing Black Sabbath's 7th studio album, Technical Ecstasy. Now this album came out September 25th, 1976, and it was produced by guitarist Tony Iommi. In the classic lineup of Black Sabbath, you always see people kind of focusing on the first 6 albums in particular. The classic lineup would go on to record 2 more albums, that being Technical Ecstasy, the subject of today's video, and the following album, Never Say Die. But those 2 albums are always seen as like the redheaded stepchildren of the classic lineup of Black Sabbath. They're not generally held as in high regard as like the previous works. And you would think after all the turbulence and just the turmoil that they went through when recording Sabotage that they'd be able to approach things in a fresh step and things would be like received like just as well as all the preceding work without having to deal with all the bullshit, but apparently not. I mean, this is kind of seen as where things really started to unravel with the Black Sabbath lineup in terms of their relationships with each other and where the band was really headed. I mean, in a lot of ways, you could say this isn't really even a metal album. You could say the same thing about the album after that, actually. I was looking through the liner notes of the album, and I found out there's a 1995 PC game by the name of Rise of the Triad. It's kind of like a first-person shooter, and they have a level actually called Technical Ecstasy that has robots in it. Just want to talk about the Technical Ecstasy album cover real quick, because apparently it's supposed to be... They took the name of the album quite literally. It's 2 robots apparently having sex. As Ozzy Osbourne so eloquently put it, 2 robots screwing on an escalator. Do with that information what you will. We'll look into this album, see how I feel about it. Does it deserve the hate that it tends to get? What's so strange about it compared to previous records? But before I start rambling, you guys know how this goes. Standard track listing only. So, in order of appearance, Backstreet Kids, You Won't Change Me, It's Alright, Gypsy, All Moving Parts Stand Still, Rock and Roll Doctor, She's Gone, and Dirty Women. Let's do this. Track 1, Backstreet Kids. Right away when this song starts, it's just this very energetic, high-speed kind of, let's go kind of vibe to it. And my favorite part about it actually is the bass line that you hear at the beginning. Just do 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 do. Probably my favorite part about this song. Tony Iommi's kind of rhythm guitar part is just it's like, kind of like a sort of Children of the Gravy kind of riff to it. He also holds his chords, these power chords a little bit later on. It's just like da 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 da. But like I said, the bass line's really the best part. Ozzy kind of comes in to sing in the verse and just kind of does that up until we reach the chorus. The chorus is very reminiscent of something like Iron Man or Electric Funeral, where his vocals are following the riff. Nobody I know will ever take my rock and roll away from me. Playing the same parts that the guitar does. That whole sequence. It goes back and forth between that high-speed verse and that kind of Iron Man-y Electric Funeral kind of chorus until we get to the Brit section, where we get this more kind of happy-sounding kind of hard rock kind of thing, not so much a speed metal-y kind of feel. It has a lot of synths. It's just really cool, like kind of synth arpeggio that you just hear. It just it's really cool. I like that part a lot. And it kind of goes back and forth between that, Ozzy singing and those like that kind of synth arpeggio that builds up a couple times until we get to Tony Iommi's guitar solo. And near the end of the guitar solo, we also have they added in some synth leads in there as well before we go back into that high-speed kind of verse section where we do one last verse and then one last chorus and the song ends. It's a very straightforward, like, 3.5-minute kind of speedy rock song. A really cool way to kick off the record. This is probably one of my favorite songs on the album. Lyrically, it just seems to be kind of about, the rock and roll lifestyle, just kind of shady counterculture kind of vibes to it. So, yeah. Cool track. Track 2, You Won't Change Me. This song starts with this like weird kind of synthesizer sounds in the background that are like really creepy before we go right into this like heavy doom metal riff. It's just down, bow, bow, ba da down, bow, 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 ba da down. And does that a couple times. You hear the synthesizer that kind of doubles the same notes in the background. Obviously a little bit higher sounding. until we get into the real meat and potatoes of this song. We get straight into the verse with this like swelling kind of organ. It's just like these big power chords coming, and Ozzy just singing, you know, I'm just a man and I am what I am. Yeah, it sounds just huge and over the top. It's fantastic. And we go right into the chorus part, which is like a little bit more optimistic sounding, not quite a major key, but it doesn't sound quite as like over the top oppressive as that verse. And it's just, you know, but I'd like to talk things over with you. That whole part that Ozzy's singing over, you hear Tony Iommi kind of do these like little embellishments on the guitar, like lead parts that, you know, that kind of add to that up into the end of the chorus where Ozzy goes like, nobody will change the way that I feel. That whole part. The bridge section has these cool kind of like piano and bass lines. And before we go into the guitar solo, and the guitar solo, Tony Iommi always seems to repeat the same basic lick. This is he does it a second time a little later on, but the second time it sounds like a little bit more shreddy, like some extra notes in there, but it's the same kind of descending kind of lick. I really like Geezer Butler's bass lines, you know, because they're in nobody's gonna change my world. That whole part, you hear Geezer kind of like boom boom boom, these cool like little walking bass line fills that he does that I really enjoy. Bass lines that he does with the chorus also sound really cool. So yeah, so overall this song's just this really kind of epic, melancholy vibe to it, and it kind of fades out with that somber, swelling organ that really kicked off the meat and potatoes of this song. Lyrically, you know, it's just about someone yearning for change, but ultimately being stuck in their ways and remaining the same, you know, because it's like he mentions several times throughout the lyrics that he's open to hearing them out, but ultimately things aren't going to change. He's going to stick to his guns and just keep doing the same old, same old. So it's almost like they want the change, but they're just too stubborn to actually go through with it. But yeah, I really like this song. It's just this really epic, oppressive, just over the top vibe to it. And I really dig it. Track 3, It's Alright. This song is interesting for a whole bunch of different reasons. It's this very like piano-driven ballad that was written and arranged by Bill Ward and sung by Bill Ward. This is the very first Black Sabbath song not featuring lead vocals by Ozzy Osbourne. So he beat Ronnie James Dio to the punch by a few years. Like I said, very piano-driven. The drum fill kind of comes in, very simple groove. This warm kind of octave kind of bass playing that Geezer Butler does. Bill's voice actually, you know, sounds pretty nice on this song, I'm not gonna lie. Very different from what Ozzy does throughout the Black Sabbath discography. So it kind of keeps going between these verses and him going, it's alright, it's alright. And we get to this simple kind of lead guitar solo that Tony Iommi does, very melodic, not super shreddy or anything. After that solo, there's a lot of like acoustic guitar overdubs that you hear just to kind of give it just very soothing kind of vibe. Simple love song, and that's all I can really say about it, but it's just really interesting to know that Bill Ward was the first singer that wasn't Ozzy Osbourne to sing lead vocals on a Sabbath album. Just weird piece of trivia. This whole song gives me like end credits of a romantic comedy movie kind of vibe. But yeah, you know, simple little ballad. I like it for what it is, and it's weird trivia, like kind of footnote in the history of Black Sabbath. Track 4, Gypsy. This song starts with this cool, like, I don't know, I guess swing kind of drum groove that Bill Ward does. It's like doom doom shika doo 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 shika doo doo doo. Reminds me of something that you would see in that movie, The Mask. That's the best comparison that I can make. And then, you know, Tony Iommi comes with these big power chords, just and you hear this bass part just do-do-do, really cool. And I really like the riff after once, it's the section that Ozzy goes like, she was a gypsy woman. It's just da 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 da. A little later on, we get to this section with this really cool kind of bass part. It's just doom, boom, 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 Really like that section a lot. I wish I did it a little longer. You only hear it for like a little bit. Right after that, we have these like, kind of piano stabs, like da 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 da, and then guitar da 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 da. Gypsy woman, you're the devil in black. Da, 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 da. That whole section. I'm giving a lot of praise to these parts, but for whatever reason, every time I go to think back about Gypsy, off the Technical Ecstasy album, I can never remember what they sound like until I listen to the song, and I'm like, oh, this is all really cool. But it never sinks into my head. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just not the best writing, or I don't know. Because my favorite part of the song is the chorus, outro thing, whatever you want to call it. It's just that part was just down, down. So you wanna be a gypsy? My favorite part of the song by far. A lot of like Tony Iommi kind of guitar solos. He actually ends this whole section with a guitar solo, like fading out. And I think the second time that they do, you wanna be a gypsy part, you hear these like kind of background vocals that are like, ah, like that part a lot. That whole outro chorus section is like my favorite part, and all the verses and everything before that always kind of forgettable for me, and I don't know why, because I do think it sounds cool. It's just a very weird song for me to talk about. Lyrically, it just seems to be about, some evil mystical woman that's deceiving the protagonist of the song, but yeah, Gypsy's a cool track. Very much kind of a shape-shifting epic, kind of like You Won't Change Me was. Very, progressive rock. A lot of those piano stabs I talked about earlier kind of remind me of something like Chicago or like ELO or something. Weird comparison, I know, but that's the kind of vibes that I get from Gypsy. But yeah, cool track. Track 5, All Moving Parts Stand Still. The first thing you notice about this song is just the funky groove it has. It's very different from everything else they've made up until this point. I mean, Black Sabbath has always had a bit of a groove to them. Not like a funky kind of feel to it. Very groovy, hard rock kind of verse. And, well, kind of intro, I should say, until we get into the verse. And bass line a Geezer does is one of my favorites. It's just doo 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 doo. Very, like, almost like Stevie Wonder kind of vibes that I get throughout this song with his bass playing, especially with the chorus. Like, it almost sounds like a weird clavinet kind of sound that the bass has. It's very cool. I also really like Bill Ward's drumming. Like, it's super groovy. And, it kind of goes back and forth between that intro, verse, chorus sections a couple times until we get to this fast, kind of energetic bridge section. Just that like on the guitar, and then Bill Ward kind of does this that kind of feel to it, and you just hear Ozzy, I like joking toys, or whatever the fuck he's saying there. After that, it has this very kind of brief kind of breakdown section, just and that kind of goes into the guitar solo before we go back into that funky intro and verse groove riffs that we had. This whole song to me is really carried by the bass and the drum grooves and stuff like that. Very different from what we're used to hearing from Black Sabbath. Again, one thing you probably noticed throughout me talking to this album, not a lot of heaviness, just a lot of like progressive rock, hard rock, like, weird kind of grooves, ballads kind of stuff. Very, very much Black Sabbath kind of pushing the boundaries of what they're known for doing. Lyrically, I interpreted the song as kind of like a critique of like politicians and stuff. I think the one lyric that encompasses what the song's about here is, since he passed the motion, they're building in the ocean, and he's saying all men should be free. What a combination, peace and radiation, and he's saying free men should fight for me. So, very much tyrannical politicians kind of being the overlords of the world. Very typical kind of Geezer Butler lyrics and his distrust for politicians in general. But yeah, All Moving Parts Stand Still is a really cool song and just a standout track in the Black Sabbath catalog in general. Track 6, Rock and Roll Doctor. This song starts with these like really over the top like gong sounds and just this like kind of lead guitar part from Tony Iommi. He gets like really shreddy at one point until we go into the verse, and it has this kind of rock and roll kind of groove. It kind of reminds me of like an early Led Zeppelin kind of vibe, and it has like, cheesy sounding cowbell and stuff like that.
I gotta have more cowbell.
Just I don't know, the song, the verse is very silly, and then we get into like the chorus. He, has this hard rock vibe where you just hear Ozzy going, "Gotta see my rock and roll doctor," like literally like, shouting it like that. Gotta see him today. So I like this song and I dislike this song at the same time. This is very over the top and cheesy to me. It's like aggressively 70s sounding. When we get to this guitar solo section, it doesn't really have that hard rock kind of vibe to it. It has this more prog rock kind of thing because you hear these synthesizers and stuff in the background before we get back into the, that whole thing during the verse. It just kind of repeats that up until the song kind of ends. Lyrically, to me, this is like Black Sabbath's Dr. Feelgood. Like, I think it's about a drug dealer. Like, gotta see my rock and roll doctor. I gotta see him. Gonna see him today. He's gonna blow me away. So, yeah, not too much I could say about the song. It's very simple, straightforward, and kind of cheesy if I'm being honest, but I do kind of enjoy it. Track 7, She's Gone. This song to me is like a continuation of past Black Sabbath ballads, like, Planet Caravan, Solitude, and in particular, I see it as a spiritual successor to Changes. Very similar in its mood and approach and lyrical themes. It has this very mournful kind of string intro and this delicate acoustic guitar that kind of comes in. Really like Ozzy Osbourne's vocals, very melodic and expressive. There's this kind of like cello sounds underneath to give it some warmth. And in place of a guitar solo, we actually had this string solo. It's just probably my favorite part of the song, really nice sounding. After that first string solo that we have there, Geezer Butler kind of comes in with this warm sounding kind of delicate bass playing that he does. And it really fills it up, like it fattens up the sound. It kind of repeats that verse and chorus again and does that kind of string solo out to the end. And we get a simple outro with just acoustic guitar before the song ends. Now, I would say this is probably like the weakest track on the album. It's either that or Rock and Roll Doctor. It's pretty close. I would still say it's like a solid like ballad. Completely different vibe from It's Alright. It's Alright is just kind of nice sort of love song. She's Gone is very much in the vein of Changes. Just this mournful kind of looking back on like just this heartache and heartbreak that this person's going through. But yeah, decent ballad, not one of my favorites that they've ever done though. Track 8, the final track, Dirty Women. Now, as soon as you hear that guitar riff, that whole thing, it has this very dangerous kind of seedy underbelly of the city kind of vibes, like just really edgy, nasty sounding. As soon as Ozzy's vocals come in, they're really like nasally, like the neon lights are shining on the edge. That whole thing sounds pretty cool, and it goes back and forth between this verse, this chorus, this verse, chorus, and near the middle we get this kind of bridge section. This da 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 da. And I should mention that throughout all these sections, you kind of have this like organ in the background that kind of gives it even more of this kind of edgy kind of vibe to it. Then we get to the very first guitar solo, and the riff underneath is one of my favorites. It's just that da 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 da. And Tony's rhythm playing and his lead playing on this song are just absolutely fantastic. I really like Bill Ward's drumming during the verses that I mentioned earlier. Really cool drum groove during that verse. After that first guitar solo section, we get back into that da 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 da, and then they kind of repeat that whole section and do this modified sped up version after, where it's like da 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 da. Very progressive rock sounding. A lot's going on during that section. Every instrument is really cool to listen to during that section. After that's over, though, they kind of hold out these power chords before going back into that guitar riff that they played for the first guitar solo. It's da 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 da. They really just milk that riff for a while, and you just hear Ozzy coming in. Oh, dirty women, they don't mess around. That whole section sounds great. That goes until halfway to the song, because the entire second half of the song is this giant, huge sounding outro. Ozzy's vocals on it are probably my favorite on this whole album, if I'm being honest. That whole section where you just hear him go, walking the streets I want whatever happened. That whole section, sounds phenomenal there. Probably just the timbre of his voice is just really nice sounding during, the guitar part in the background. This is kind of like arpeggio, just that whole section. And after he's done singing, Tony Iommi just does this like huge, just never-ending guitar solo basically, because he just shreds up until the song ends and it fades out. And Geezer and Bill in the background just kind of keep changing up the rhythm. They do all these different like bass fills and drum grooves, and really cool sounding. And in the background, there's these vocals, just dirty women, and it just keeps going and going until it fades out. Now, out of all the songs on Technical Ecstasy, Dirty Women is probably the most celebrated. It's the one that has actually, popped up in their set lists since the album's release. I don't think they've ever really played much of anything else off of it. And it's definitely the standout track. Like, I've given praise to some of the other tracks, but this is definitely the best song on the album, like, by far. Just really well arranged. I really like how it constantly changes. The progressive rock elements really add to it. Really love the guitar riffs, the bass fills, the drum grooves, the lead guitar parts, Ozzy singing. It all just kind of comes together into this big, huge song that you can kind of picture like in a stadium kind of setting. The song just rules. Really like Dirty Women. Lyrically, the song's about hookers. You guys know I've been doing the Artist Spotlight. This will be the final video in which I will be promoting Psychoprism. Psychoprism is a New York/New Jersey-based power metal band. If you guys really like power metal or even old school bands like Queensryche, I'd really suggest you check these guys out. This is a clip from their music video Rise. Check it out. So what are my overall thoughts on Technical Ecstasy? I gotta be honest with you, I really don't think it's the steaming pile of shit that it's made out to be. That being said, it's not a masterpiece either. It does have its flaws and problems. It's not really a heavy metal album. It leans more heavily on hard rock and progressive rock. And the best way I could put it is it's almost as if they used Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath as a base and just decided to make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more streamlined, less heavy, more hard rocking, as opposed to, like a metal assault. But they still lean on those, synthesizers and progressive rock kind of vibes to it. Up until this point, this might be my least favorite Ozzy Sabbath album, despite me thinking it's still a pretty solid album. It doesn't really hold up quite as much as the first 6. Best stuff on it really isn't quite as compelling. I do like the production on it though. Geezer's noticeably much louder in the mix compared to a lot of the other albums that Tony Iommi has produced. And really like the growly kind of guitar tone. The drums sound cool. Ozzy sounds great. In particular, Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler really sound really fantastic on this album, as do Ozzy Osbourne's vocals and Bill Ward's drumming, but the bass and the guitar are the standouts for me. One thing I will say that Technical Ecstasy has over Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath though is it doesn't really sound as tame. It does still have, a little bit of grit to it. Not as much as like Sabotage, but, still a little bit of nastiness. A lot more than Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath does, but I don't think it's quite as good of an album. That's all I really got to say about it. So I would give it probably like a 3 out of 5. Probably, up until this point, like I said, probably my least favorite Ozzy Sabbath album. Top 3 tracks, that's pretty easy. Backstreet Kids, I really like the speedy kind of, almost speed metal kind of approach to it. Just a quick punch in the mouth kind of vibe. All Moving Parts Stand Still, really like that funky Stevie Wonder-ish almost kind of vibe that it has. And then Dirty Women, I really like the prog rock elements of it, the way it constantly changes, that huge never-ending solo at the end. But yeah, those are my top 3 tracks. Anyway, sorry it took so long to get the review of this album out. New job, as you could tell by my attire tonight. It's been pretty busy. Hopefully soon I will have my video on Never Say Die. which is the following album in the Black Sabbath retrospective. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.